Hi everyone, and welcome to the Society of Outdoor Recreation Professionals webinar on keys to effective surveys, survey methods, examples, and lessons learned from recent SCORP planning efforts. My name is Sergio Capozzi, and I'm the current president of SORP. I'm particularly excited about today's webinar, being a bit of a survey and data geek myself, and I'm really grateful that we've got 4 amazing professionals who have volunteered their time today to share their experience with surveys and data collection techniques on this webinar. For those of you who are not currently SORP members, SORP is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that's been around since 1983. We originally got our start as a group made up of SCORP planners dedicated to SCORP planning. Over time, and as our membership grew and diversified, our core mission has expanded beyond just SCORP planning, though SCORPs do remain an important focus of our efforts. Today, our members include federal, state, and local agency staff, academics, nonprofits, and private consultants engaged in outdoor recreation planning, management, policy development, and research. As an organization focused on outdoor recreation, we are committed to advancing educational professional development opportunities, such as this webinar here today in our annual National Outdoor Recreation Conference, developing and voicing a united position on outdoor recreation issues and concerns, promoting scholarship and advancement for students and young professionals, providing our members with the latest resources and networking opportunities through our website, weekly emails, and annual conference. If you aren't a member, I would highly encourage you to learn more about SORP via our website and consider joining. Now, I mentioned that SORP has its origins in SCORP planning, and that this continues to be one of our important focus areas. As an organization, we believe in the power of SCORPs as a planning tool and see the potential to strengthen them in the future. In fact, we recently authored a position paper on SCORPs entitled Reframing the Role and Relevancy of Statewide Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plans, which is available on the SORP Reports page of our website. Additionally, we partner with the National Park Service to offer a SCORP University session at our annual conference. This well-attended session focuses on topics relevant to the SCORP process and provides participants an opportunity to engage with other professionals involved in SCORP planning efforts. I'll mention a bit more about this session at the end of our webinar, but did want to put in a plug for it here at the beginning. All right. Let's jump into the reason we're all here today, to learn about effective survey methods. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have an amazing group of individuals slated to share their expertise today. They include Dr. Robert Burns, who's an associate professor at West Virginia University and has nearly 20 years of research experience in public land social science and in working with public land managers. He has conducted practical research focused on all aspects of visitor use monitoring in federal and state lands and water-based settings. Robert is also a SORP board member and is the co-author of SORP's soon-to-be-published book on outdoor recreation planning. Our next presenter, Terry Burgerson, has a Master's of Science degree in Recreation and Resource Development from Texas A&M University in College Station, Texas. Following graduation, he worked as a research support scientist with the National Park Service Cooperative Park Studies Unit at the University of Idaho. Terry has been an outdoor recreation planner with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department since May 2000. During that time, he was the project manager and primary author of 3 Oregon statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plans and an Oregon statewide trails plan. Next up will be Scott Babcock, who serves as the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Planning Manager and assists with long-range division and property-level planning efforts, including the division's strategic plan, park management plans, and statewide outdoor recreation planning efforts, including SCORP. Scott oversaw the development of Colorado's award-winning 2008 SCORP and is also leading the 2014 SCORP update. He's also a current SORP board member serving as our secretary. And last but not least, we have Pat Gillespie. Pat serves as the National Park Service liaison to SORP. She currently is the National Park Service Land and Water Conservation Fund State and Local Assistance Program Lead for Environmental Compliance, as well as the SCORP Lead, where she supports efforts to improve SCORP quality. She is assigned to the National Park Service headquarters in Washington, D.C. To give everyone a brief preview of what's to come during the webinar, Robert will lead off with a discussion of some general survey methods. Terry and Scott will follow up with their survey experiences related to the Oregon and Colorado SCORPs respectively, and then Pat will close with some key takeaways and lessons learned. Time permitted, we will answer as many questions as possible at the end of the webinar. You can ask a question at any time by using the question pane on the control panel. The questions generally won't be answered until the end. Also, Please make sure to mute your line during the webinar so that we can all hear the presenters, and be aware that the presentation is being recorded. The recorded version of the webinar will be posted on the SORP website in the future. And one last thing before I turn it over to Robert. I'd ask for everyone's patience during the webinar. Our speakers are participating from locations across the country, and while we don't anticipate any technological glitches, you never know what gremlins might pop up when you least anticipate them. Hopefully I haven't jinxed us all by saying that. And with that, Robert, I'll turn things over to you.
Okay, thank you, Sergio. I appreciate that that introduction. So you should all see an introductory slide called Research for SCORP, and I'm going to talk today very broadly about the process of research and some of the general methods and some of the, I guess I would say, specific points. And then we'll have, as Sergio mentioned, we'll have Terry Bergeson from Oregon and Scott Babcock from Colorado talk about two specific areas. So why the need for research and evaluation? Very often we need to ask ourselves and our agencies questions such as, is my agency meeting the objectives of the programs? Is my agency meeting the needs of my customers? And is my agency even financially stable? We can try to answer these questions through research and evaluation. And when we do research for SCORP, we're talking about a very specific programmatic type of research. As Scott and Terry will talk about shortly, we use several different types of methodologies for SCORP and use them different times for different reasons. The first of those is mailback surveys. Many people use mailback surveys because they can simply put together a survey instrument, mail that with the agency letterhead and envelope out to a family or a household, and the people can answer the questions about their recreation experiences at home while they're sitting around having a cup of coffee. One of the problems with this methodology is a relatively low response rate, some falling now between 20 and 30% response rate. So although you can reach a lot of people, you don't get quite as much feedback as you do some other methods. Another type of survey is a web-based survey. Web-based surveys are becoming much more popular today with the internet being accessible to many people. However, not all people do have internet access, so we can't rely solely on web-based surveys. One of the more popular brands is SurveyMonkey, and there's a few others that are used frequently for people to be able to give input. Another type of research is focus group or town hall meetings. We use these for different reasons. Again, we tend to use focus group or town hall meetings to either set the context for a future mailback or on-site survey, or following an on-site or mailback or phone survey, we use the focus group or town hall meetings to answer any questions that may have arisen from the results we got from the field survey. Also to specifically talk with target markets such as children, youth, urban youth, for example. We might not get at them properly through a phone survey or a mailback survey. Telephone surveys also is another method that really seems to be falling out of favor, primarily because there's less and less landlines, and people certainly don't answer their phone to listen to a survey on a cell phone. And the bullet that comment is not here is on-site or in-field surveys. We use a lot of these types of surveys where we conduct interviews of recreationists while they're recreating or as they're finishing their recreation experience. And a real advantage of this is a very low response rate. About 95% of the folks that are contacted tend to answer the questions. There's no lack of, there's no time has elapsed between them having their experience and leaving the forest and going back home. And also they are all basically satisfied customers because they're out there having the experience, so we can really get a lot of good information about their overall trip. One of the negatives about the on-site survey is that it obviously only gets information from those people who are on-site, and anybody who's displaced or hasn't come out there for any reason would not be contacted. So that's a background on the different types of surveys. And then some considerations about how you structure your survey and how you design it. And basically, it's really important to understand which segment you want to reach. It's important to collect enough data from each of those segments that you can actually say something about that segment. I think about 40 years ago, Elwood Schaefer from Penn State wrote a very short 7-page article entitled "The Average Camper That Doesn't Exist." And we tend to look at averages. We say the average respondent is 37 years old, and that's aggregating a lot of data. So it's important to understand the different segments that use your area. And to select the best method for this. If you want to get at ethnic minorities who are recreating at a specific area at a lake, then you probably need to understand when they are participating as a group or understand how to reach them, whether it's telephone, on-site survey, or focus group interview. Surveying and conducting outdoor recreation research requires a lot of time and energy. It's not something that should be undertaken by somebody who simply wants to get a little bit of data because a little bit is better than nothing, because usually it's not. It's something that requires quite a bit of I would say, training and education to develop a survey instrument. You want to make sure that the questions you're asking are appropriate, that they're sensitive, that they can be replicated so that they're reliable. So there's a lot that goes into this. And then lastly, they can be effectively outsourced. If you don't have the expertise on your staff, in your office, local universities and local consulting companies are often very much available to conduct these research efforts. So the steps of the research process, I'm just going to kind of go over these briefly, but they're very similar to any type of inquiry that we look at. And first of all, identifying the problem. So if you want to identify the problem, it's very important to understand what it is that we're talking about. Let's say that we want to look at childhood obesity as an example. We want to really understand childhood obesity. And a lot of folks, obviously, across the United States are doing this now and demonstrating the relevance of outdoor recreation and parks to combating this issue. So our issue is childhood obesity. What's the second step we would want to do is review the literature. Those of you who have gone to grad school are probably used to the term literature review and kind of roll your eyes and groan like we all do. But really, in your case, if you're conducting a survey, it's looking for similar studies that have been conducted on this topic. It's not necessarily looking at every journal article that's been written in the past 20 years, but what's been done contextually about this specific topic of childhood obesity. What has been the role of outdoor recreation parks in that? What has happened in your agency, in your system, or in surrounding areas and systems that might be applicable? So that's the second step, is reviewing the literature. And then that will help you to actually clarify the problem, specifically identifying the purpose of the study. It's very important to have that problem identified to the point where you understand exactly what problem you're trying to solve. The purpose of the study, in this case that I'm using, is to determine if walking 10,000 steps a day for 3 days a week will improve a person's health. So that's a specific way of understanding if outdoor recreation can impact childhood obesity. And so there's a testing process where you select a group of people, you inform them of what you're going to have them do, which is count the number of steps they take per day. In this case, you would offer them a mechanism that counts the number of steps they take per day, and then go through the process of determining that. So again, the purpose of the study is to determine if walking 10,000 steps a day for 3 days a week improves a person's health. The fourth step is to clearly define terms and concepts. This is done so that people can understand exactly what each term means. So when you're talking with people, a lot of times it's very easy to slip into jargon, which is very familiar with us outdoor recreation professionals or within your specific agency. But many times people don't even understand who is operating what type of recreation entity. Much of the population doesn't know if they're in a national forest or a national or a state park many times. So it's important to really clarify the terms and the concepts. The fifth thing is to identify, or excuse me, to define the population. In our example of looking at childhood obesity, we're suggesting that the population will be children between the ages of 10 and 12 years. If you're looking at a different issue, you'll have a different population. And for example, if you want to understand Hispanic use at your specific park, then you want to identify that group and target them in the appropriate method. The next step is to develop the instrumentation plan. The instrumentation plan, as I mentioned previously, is very important. The old adage of garbage in, garbage out is applicable. If you design a survey that is easily conducted, that people understand the words that are written on it, that the font is large enough for baby boomers to be able to read it, that the prevalent language is taken into account, then you have the possibility of succeeding. But if any of these are forgotten or not taken care of at the outset, then a lot of that time and energy that I talked about previously will simply be wasted. So developing the survey instrument plan, we're saying that data will be collected on the variables at the beginning of the program and the conclusion of the study. And so those data would be specifically defined. And Terry and Scott will talk to you about specific data that they've collected. Collecting the actual data itself is also a critical step. It's very important that trained interviewers conduct the surveys, that the surveys are asked exactly the same each time, that the interviewers understand that bias always exists in data collection, and we must always combat bias. For example, in the National Visitor Use Monitoring Program that the Forest Service runs, in this process, when we approach somebody who's exiting a national forest in a car, when we come to the window, we ask them who in the car over the age of 16 has had the most recent birthday. That gets at the bias of having a male typically driving a vehicle. We have a similar reverse situation when we do telephone calls. So it's important to understand bias always exists, and we must be as methodical as possible to avoid that. And then analyzing the data. Comparing the data gathered from each participant. The first measurements are compared to the second measurements to see if there is a difference. Now, I gave you a very simple example that we're looking at. Again, we're looking at children between 10 and 12. We want to understand if they walk 10,000 steps a day, if they're conditioned, if their health is improved. In this case, we would have measured their health through a series of variables prior to the study starting, and we measure those same variables in the same way at the end of the study, and we measure differences. So the data is analyzed, and the report is given. So generally, those are the overall steps of the research process. I want to talk a little bit about the difference between qualitative and quantitative designs. And this table shows quantitative and qualitative differences. So if you go to the left side of this, we want to understand the focus of qualitative versus quantitative. When I say quantitative, we're looking at variables. The focus is on variables, and we'll talk about variables a little later. On qualitative, it's the overall experience. So with quantitative, we tend to look at individual data such as gender, age, ethnicity, education, and so forth. With qualitative, we don't look at those variables. We try to understand the overall experience without looking at numbers. That leads to the second one, which is the data that are collected. Quantitative is always numbers or numerical scores, so looking at the number of people who've recreated, the percent of time that they are in sight of other visitors, the proportion of persons who are of a particular gender, for example. However, in qualitative, it's a narrative description without numbers or numerical scores. Selection of people in the study. As I mentioned earlier, when you're doing a quantitative study, you purposefully select the people to represent a group. An example of that will be given by both Terry and Scott in their section. However, in a qualitative study, there's a limited number of subjects. For example, next week in Seattle, I'll be conducting 3 different focus groups in downtown Seattle of low-income persons who live in the Seattle urban area. So in order to select those participants, we went to the census data, and we tried to understand the specific blocks within Seattle where low-income people live that are within close enough proximity to the park for which we're trying to gather data. So it's a limited number of subjects. We'll have 8 to 10 people in a focus group. That'll be our qualitative study. The study procedures are very rigidly designed for a quantitative study. As I mentioned earlier, there's very, very specific ways of asking questions. The exact scale, the Likert scale, or whatever you're using, has probably been used somewhere before. So it's very important to make sure that the way you're asking the question is the way that it was asked in the past, and if not, why are you deviating from it? The study procedures for a qualitative study are much less rigid. In the case that I mentioned for next week in our focus groups in Seattle, I've developed what we call a survey outline guide, and that's a series of 5 questions that are just prompts for the 8 to 10 people that we'll be talking to. And I'll ask them to expound upon their points and talk more in depth. So there are only 5 general questions, very loosely put together, and it's designed to encourage conversation and discussion. The next step will be data analysis, and very, very significant differences there. When you're conducting quantitative studies, obviously analyzed with statistics, whether it's the statistical package for social sciences, R, Excel, or whatever method you're using. There's a very rigid methodology of analyzing statistically data. However, with qualitative data, it's basically coded in a quantitative method. There are a few programs that do a good job of content analysis, but it's very much a process of looking at the data and coding it based on the themes that jump out to a person reading it. So although it's much less rigid in design, it's actually much more difficult to actually analyze the data. And the summary of results, obviously you'll receive a statistical summary for a quantitative study. We've all seen those before, a report that shows the proportions of people across different segments. And with a qualitative study, it's a much more narrative process and tends to basically tell a story. When we use qualitative data, we know that we're not going to use numbers, and we understand that this data, these data that we're presenting, is a much richer and dense set of data as compared to the quantitative study. So this data needs to tell a story, and it needs to be adequately analyzed, and really it's very important that it's interpreted correctly, because it's all about the story when it comes to the qualitative design. When I talk about variables, and I'm just going to spend a moment talking about this, there's some very common social concepts that we look at regarding people and what they're doing. So in this case, we know that we're going to categorize people in a dichotomous variable, male or female, upper class or lower class, young or old. We look at race and ethnicity, and maybe have several categories under that. In fact, the U.S. government has very specific racial and ethnic categories that you must use when you talk to interviewees. And it's very important to, as a part of the literature review, to understand this and ask this in the correct way. Going down to the bottom part, it's really also very important that the variables are segmented or designed so that they make sense. Many times you'll see a survey that has 10 different categories for age. This might be 16 or under, 17 to 20, 20 to 25, 25 to 30, and so on and so on. But really, in the end, when you're providing this information to a recreation resource manager such as yourself, really you want to understand something like young, middle-aged, and old. So it's really important that the attributes of the variable are teased out, and this should be done prior to the study taking place so that the researcher is able to set this up properly. I'll go on to the next slide. Linking the research to planning. I think and I think I'll mention this here in a moment, but research is nothing but a means to an end. So all of the research that I conduct, or that my colleagues and I conduct for agencies, is designed to provide you with information. And so basically we set up the research in a way that makes sense to a resource manager. And I begin every survey report that's that I deliver, and I accompany that with a presentation. So the bottom line is the bottom line up front. It's always very important to have an executive summary. We want to provide that to you so that you can see the bottom line up front. You can look at it within 1 to 2 pages. You can grasp that, and then that's probably what your boss or your boss's boss would look at anyway. That's all they have time to look at. Linking research to planning, it's also very important to understand the purpose of the study. As I mentioned earlier, why you're conducting the study, it really dictates how the study is going to be done. Looking at the background of the study, it's important to understand what types of studies have been conducted in the past and how your study relates to those. The methods, I think we talked about, it's very important to make sure that the method you're using is going to be similar to the method that was used previously, or if not, we understand why that deviation has occurred. And also remember that your method will be replicated in the future when you're gone. So it's very important to capture the data about the exact methodology that you use, where a person conducted a survey at which specific site at a lake becomes very important 5 years from now, 10 years from now when the study is conducted again. The results should be information, again, that's provided to a manager that really, if you're talking about a quantitative study, this is the numbers part. This is where you can kind of get lost in a lot of numbers, but you don't have to look at every number. Every number is important. Every single number in a report or in a presentation is important, but you might look at them a month from now or a year from now. So the results are the data that show the actual statistical analysis. Recommendations are something that, in my opinion, every resource manager should demand of a research study. If you're paying for a study, that somebody to go out and just give you the results is not good enough. Those people have expertise. They've looked at the previous literature, so they should be able to provide recommendations. Survey instruments, it's very important to maintain those and understand how a question was asked previously and make sure that it's asked correct. It can be asked the same way in the future. And then other appendices are very important. A lot of times a quantitative survey will have a few open-ended questions, or another appendices might be the zip code data. You're not going to obviously sit there and pore over the zip code data, but you might be able to use that in the future when you come into a desire to look at where people are coming from, for example. You could take this same database that you used, that your research partner gave to you or provided to you, go in and pull out the zip code data and use some sort of GIS or ARC pen type process and use the data in a different way. So maintaining the survey instruments, maintaining all the information and other appendices is very important. So in ending, I would say that the process of research analysis is a means to an end. All it is information that a researcher provides you so that you can make a decision. A resource manager should demand that a recreation research program has the topics that I discussed here, and as I said, these two professional experts in the field will go over 2 specific case studies. With that, I'll turn it over to Terry Bergerson.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. I'll be talking about the statewide outdoor recreation survey that was conducted for the state of Oregon as part of the 2011 Oregon SCORP planning effort. The things that I'll be talking about today are the goals, methods, budget, questionnaire development, a little bit about the survey results, how the surveys were used, and a little bit about what we learned through the survey process, because it was just the survey report was just published in 2012, so it's really just hot off the press, basically. The last time we conducted a statewide outdoor recreation participation survey in Oregon was in 2002. So typically these types of surveys where you look at what the entire population is doing in terms of outdoor recreation participation is done every 10 years. They have a 10-year shelf life, and it's a fairly expensive endeavor if you hire a consultant to do this work. We examine a list of 70 activities in terms of what they're doing, and those activities are not only within the communities, but also outside of the communities in areas like Forest Service lands or BLM lands or state parks. This survey was conducted by a couple of researchers for us at Oregon State University, Craig Lindberg and Randy Rosenberger from the School of Forestry. I think it's, one of the things I've learned in doing survey work is it's better to have a team of researchers than an individual researcher, because you can get a lot of good feedback and discussions going between the research team. So the goals for the survey were to, like I said before, estimate outdoor recreation participation, but also to evaluate opportunities to increase participation. So, a needs assessment is a really big component. What types of facilities people would like to see in their basically neck of the woods. And also, really important to provide recreation planners across the state with good statistically reliable results that they can use in their local planning and regional planning efforts. So city park and recreation departments doing system-wide outdoor recreation plans can use the information that we identify in this plan or in this survey to work in their particular jurisdiction. That's what we're hoping for. So the level of analysis is really critical when you're talking about using information to identify need and also to allow that information to be used in local planning processes. So in the 2002 plan, we looked at 11 SCORP planning regions for the state. But when we completed that survey, we got feedback from people, let's say the city of Hood River, which is east of the Portland metropolitan area. It's really a rural community, but it's also in SCORP planning region 2, which also includes the Portland metropolitan area. So Hood River using that information is quite of a stretch. The regional scale was basically too broad for recreation planners to use. So a decision was made by Oregon Parks and Recreation Department to make a substantial investment in this next survey to provide information at the county level. So there are 36 counties in the state of Oregon. Some of those have fairly high population, and some of them are very large in size but have very low population. So, we wanted to maximize the resources that we have, so we set target completions of 25 for each of the low population counties, 100 for an additional 4 counties that had a little bit higher population but were still low, and 240 completions for the other 29 counties in the state. So we get, for the most part, in 29 of the 36 counties, real reliable information. And then we can kind of combine some of these other counties that are low population counties to get good information for them. Robert talked a little bit about the different types of methodologies. A mailback survey, as you can imagine, you get the surveys returned. You have to do all the data input for all of those surveys that come in. On an internet survey, in this case, we use Qualtrics is the software package. It allows you to control the variables a little bit more than SurveyMonkey does. All that information goes directly into the system, so data input isn't required, and there's a lot of savings associated with that. So we did because knowing that everyone doesn't have internet access, we still needed to provide an opportunity for mail surveys. So we did an internet preference approach where we try to get them to fill out the survey online by giving them a URL, but a postage-paid postcard is also included with that mailing for them to send back if they want to get a hard copy of the survey. So we use the Dillman's method to increase survey response, a pre-notice letter, invitation letter, and 2 reminder letters. And we also drew the sample from the DMV list of driver's license holders 18 years and older in the state of Oregon. In this case, unlike the past, we used to just have a survey for participants, somebody who had one person in the household or more that participated in an outdoor recreation activity in the last year. But this time we wanted to find out a little bit of information about non-participants, who they were, and what also things managers could do to increase their participation or lure them back into outdoor recreation participation. The next slide shows a little information about response rates. Looking at those targets, it's a fairly substantial survey. We mailed out over 50,000 letters. 92% of those were delivered, and we had about 8,900 completions for a 19% response rate. Looking at the types of, or the versions, we got 47%, about half online, and about 53% on paper. So it's still really important if you're going to do an online survey to also include a paper option, because a lot of people obviously prefer that. More people prefer that in this survey. Completes by county. Was really happy to see this. We, 240 completions, were able to hit that in almost all of the high population counties, and we had some lower numbers for, as we would expect, for some of these small counties. With populations of 1,500, you'd literally have to survey the entire population to get the numbers that you're looking for. So all in all, real good numbers in terms of hitting our targets for each of the 36 counties in Oregon. The data was weighed by age and county population prior to analysis. So when we look at county information, we need to weigh that information as we ratchet it up to the regional scale and also to the statewide scale as well. And like I said, due to low sample sizes, there were a few counties that were included in the survey that we needed to combine their information with close-by counties in order to get them up to the target that we're looking for in terms of completion. So we provided survey information for each of the 36 counties in the state. An effort like this is fairly expensive when you're talking about looking at county-level information. A total of $272,000 for this project, but when you look at the 10-year shelf life, around $27,000 per year. We're able to get 40% of that, of the amount, from a land and water grant, which is part of the statewide or stateside allocation to Oregon. 30% of it came from our planning department within the agency, and also an additional 30% came from the state ATV grant program and also the local grant program, which is a lottery program, grant program that our agency administers. So that money came from the administrative side of those two grant programs. Robert said that these types of efforts take time. So, typically a SCORP planning effort may be a 2-year effort. So I would encourage you to start a survey effort very soon in terms of the planning process, so you can get that information as you start making your recommendations at the final end of your survey. This is really the primary method of public outreach that Oregon has used for its SCORP plan. In the past, we tried to do public meetings across the state, and like other states, we find that if we're talking about public meetings for a specific park site, like a state park or a local park, you will fill the room. But if you're talking about getting feedback from the general population about statewide issues, it's a little different subject and quite a bit lower participation. So this is the best way that we could find to collect that information. Questionnaire development is really important, like Robert was talking about. I spent probably a couple of months looking at trying to gather as many SCORP survey questionnaires as I could, and also surveys that other state parks had done, and really looking at collecting those types of questions that would be most relevant for the state of Oregon. The next thing is the research team developed the initial questionnaire drafts, and then a really important factor was to pull a survey advisory committee together. Really important because this information is going to be used by federal agencies, state agencies, county, local park and recreation departments. So there's quite a bit of difference in terms of needs for each of those types of recreation providers. So we wanted to make sure that we got feedback from each one of those in order to make sure that the information would be as usable as possible. And also, a pre-test of the survey is really important to check on your response rate, the survey length, and the clarity of questions. And we make quite a bit of some changes from the initial survey instrument based on the results of the pre-test. Some of the questions that we asked: outdoor recreation activity participation. We categorized those so it wasn't just a long list of 70 activities. We see here that it was not, the one category was non-motorized trail or related activities. So all sorts of different types of trail activities there. We ask a number of questions: the number of times they participated, the number of people within their household that participated, and also where in the state that they participated in this activity the most. For example, if we're talking about visiting the coast and being, beach activities, we didn't want those activities to show up on the wrong side of the state. So we basically get where in the state those activities are being participated in. The next thing is the trying to identify priority need within communities. This information is really usable for grant programs, in the evaluation criteria, but also for local planning. So we looked at a number of different ways of prioritizing need, but really came down to a very simple way of doing it, and that is using a scale from 1 to 5, from lowest priority need to highest priority need, and asked a whole series of questions about specific types of facilities, from like children's playgrounds, picnic areas, various types of trails, community gardens, and so forth. Really important information. Also in the state, the need for additional funding for operation and maintenance was the top issue, I think it was in Colorado as well. And during these difficult times, it's important to give providers information that they can use to make a case for additional funding with their public, with their elected officials. So we looked at looking at those things, those potential benefits that were valued the most, and also how the local providers were providing those types of activities or those types of benefits. So a long list of benefits there. Quickly on the survey results, looking at the percentage of the population that participated in one or more activity. 92% of Oregonians participated in at least one outdoor recreation activity in 2012. Looking at statewide scale information, here's how the information was presented for each of the 70 activities. Not only user occasions, that's really the number of times somebody participated in an activity once over a 24-hour period of time, but also the percentage of the population participating, the average number of times that they participate during the course of the year, and the average number of household members participating. If you ask the questions this way, you can provide information for both user occasions and percent of the population. There's a bit of difference in terms of those two measurements. And a lot of times states just simply provide the percentage of the population. So as we're looking at it in Oregon, really it's those things: walking basically at facilities that are close to home, walking on local streets and sidewalks, walking on local trails and paths, and then we get on the list: sightseeing, relaxing, beach activities, and so forth. A little bit different when you look at user occasions. The cumulative number of user occasions at the statewide scale. Walking on local streets and sidewalks is still number one. Walking on trails and paths is number two, but then some of the other activities start popping up, things that you do every day, like walking dogs, bicycling on roads, relaxing, hanging out, and so forth. So a lot of those trail-related activities moved up a lot higher in terms of user occasions than percentage of the population. And this slide here shows really the reason why you should collect both of those two types of information, because at the top it looks like they're fairly similar in terms of the percent of the population, but when we look at the bottom, these are the top 5 activity or top 10 activities, you can see that there's considerable difference in these activities in terms of user occasions. And as you can imagine, a lot of information presented, 70 activities, just a lot of information for each of the 36 counties. So this information is provided at both the regional and the county scale as well in terms of user occasions and percentage of the population. And also we summarize those top 10 activities for each of the regions and the counties as well, so they didn't have to go back and look at final report, the long tables in the survey report to get that information. We summarize that information. Looking at highest priority need in the state, this is at the statewide scale. We see that dirt and other soft surface trail and paths are number 1. That's something we also found in the Oregon Trail Survey about 10 years ago, is that the population tends to prefer, when they're walking, soft surface trails as opposed to hard surface multiple use trails. Public access to waterways. Children's natural play areas was also number 3 and fairly high. We wanted to see if there was a difference between natural play areas and children's play areas that were built with manufactured structures like swing sets, slides, and so forth. And what we found out is that there is a strong interest within the population, and they see a need for those types of facilities, and hopefully we'll be able to build more of those in the next 10 years or next 5 years in the state of Oregon. Off-street bicycling and trails, nature and wildlife viewing, and also picnic areas and shelters for small visitor groups. Again, this priority information was also presented at the regional and also at the county level scale in the report, or in the various summaries. Next, looking at value and delivery at the state scale. We're really keying in on the things that have high mean scores for both value and mean scores for delivery. Those things that are top are improving physical health and fitness, something that we're all aware of, and also we know in Oregon now that benefit really resonates with the population. Also, make your community a more desirable place to live and preserve open spaces in the environment. Things that aren't so high are things like promoting tourism, help attracting new residents and businesses, those sorts of things that maybe politicians would be excited about, but Oregonians don't seem to be all that excited about drawing additional people to their communities. So quite a bit of difference there. That information is also presented at the regional level and at the county level as well. Next, a little quickly about non-participant results of the non-participant survey. Again, that was a small percentage of the population that didn't participate in outdoor recreation activity. But within that group, we see that 72% of these non-participants are actually had participated in outdoor recreation previously to 2011. So there are customers before. We had an open-ended question asking them why they don't participate now, and what we got back was that they were either disabled, they were because of age, or that they were too old, it was too expensive and can't afford it. And this information really resonates at this time with the fact that the baby boomer population is aging in the state of Oregon. So I think one could make an argument that now is a really good time to start working on making accommodations for that particular age group in order to keep those people participating as we move forward. We also asked them things about the importance of things that may limit one's participation. A long list of barriers here, rating it from non-important to extremely important. And what we find is that at the state scale, the highest items were lack of time, poor health, and concerns about safety and crime in parks. This concern about safety is something that we see in Oregon State Park surveys as well. Safety is an issue not only in close-to-home parks in large metropolitan areas, but also something of concern in dispersed areas as well. We also have this information at the regional scale as well. A little bit about how do we use the results in the plan. All of these survey reports were included in the OPRD website, and a link was sent out to recreation providers as soon as the information was available. We developed individual region and county survey report summaries to make it easier for them to consume that information. We also used the needs assessment results in identifying priority facilities in land and water grant criteria that we've come up with. And also, because local planning is so important, we updated the publication Community Park and Recreation Planning for Oregon Communities to include survey results to help them locally with their planning efforts. So this is a link to the site where you can get access to all the different reports, survey reports right now for Oregon. The full report, the regional summary reports, and the county summary report. This is a kind of slide showing how we use the needs assessment information in the land and water grant criteria to identify those types of facilities that would receive more points. So similar to Colorado, we did a survey of recreation providers to find out what need they identified, both close to home within urban growth boundaries in the state of Oregon and also in dispersed settings, more of a state park, county, forestry, or forestry, U.S. Forest Service, BLM type of settings. And also, you can see that we had the Oregon resident survey information shown here as well. So any identified need with a score of 3.0 or higher is included on the list for each of those counties in the evaluation criteria. I mentioned we also included survey results in the Community Park and Recreation Planning Guide. So in an appendices, we have all the information that we talked about here at the county level for them to use, and also integrated that information into forms for showing percent of the population participating in user occasions in the first form, and also identified need through the needs assessment in the second form on the right side here. So those communities that can't afford to hire a consultant and or have the skills to do a survey can use this county level information to integrate it into their system planning. So the things that we've learned is that basically the county level results are useful and are being used in community park and system planning, that the regional results are being used by federal agencies in fairly large-scale planning efforts, and that also that there are significant differences in recreation participation across counties. And finally, that I would urge some caution in terms of deleting questions when you use a advisory committee, because if you delete them without letting everyone know, they get a little bit disappointed in terms of what you've done. So first of all, looking at a presentation, well, I gave a presentation to Forest Grove up in the Portland area, and they were looking at trail planning. And so I gave a presentation about the statewide survey results and county level results, and that information was picked up by the local press. So, you know, it really adds credibility to local efforts when they can bring in somebody from the state and talk about the state results in terms of being similar to what they're proposing in their particular neck of the woods. There's also a couple of large-scale planning efforts. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is doing the Willamette Valley Conservation Study, and the BLM is doing the Western Oregon planning effort. They don't really have information about the general public in terms of what their recreation participation is. They may have in-room information specific to their agency, but really look for states to provide information about regional and statewide results. Real quickly about the differences between outdoor recreation participation, looking at walking on local trails, quite a bit of difference. Looking at counties like Baker, Marion, and Deschutes, where it's basically 70% of the population, or Baker a little bit higher, involved in walking on local trails and paths. But when you look at some of the other more dispersed setting counties where they don't have a lot of trails, we can get down to 29% or 30% of the population doing it. Also, as you can imagine, culturally there's quite a difference between what types of activities people are involved in rural settings as opposed to urban settings. We can see that in some of the rural settings, ATV participation may be upwards of 40%, but when you get into the large metropolitan areas like Portland, Multnomah, and Washington County, anywhere from 2% to 4% of the population, so quite a bit of difference there. And then finally, during the pilot test, we dropped the question. It was a needs assessment question. The one we used was more geared towards close to home types of recreational facilities, and then we had another one about more dispersed types. There were too many questions. The survey was too long, and we made a determination to knock off the one that was showing on the right side of the screen here, and some of the providers were fairly disappointed. So it's really important to let everyone know in terms of the advisory committees what you're doing, not simply give them the revised version, but also give them a summary of the things that you've reduced. So that is really what we've done in Oregon. And next I'll turn over to Scott Babcock to talk about what they're doing in Colorado.
Thanks, Terry. Appreciate it. Thanks, Robert and Sergio. I'm a big fan of Oregon's work. They've done some tremendous things, and we do our best to try and take away all the good things that they've been doing as well. So you'll see some similarities here with what we've done in our 2012 local government survey and in our 2013 Colorado statewide public survey. Just to start out here, I'm going to talk about two different surveys, and really I'm going to be focusing more on preliminary results. Actually, both of these surveys are actually in progress, so I hesitate to say that everything here is definitive. I want everyone, I think, to focus more on the thought process involved, the rationale, and less on the results. So we had two surveys that we embarked on. We did the local government survey and the statewide public survey. Both of these surveys we initiated or did actually back in 2007 for our 2008 SCORP, and we repeated both of them. Couple differences though. The local government survey was very similar. The previous one was a written survey that was distributed and completed. We relied heavily on using the web this time. On the statewide public survey previously we did a telephone survey, and this time we did a little bit more aggressive web-based and mail survey, similar to what Oregon did. However, we went down to the regional level and not the county level. In developing our local government survey, and I'm going to talk first about this local government survey, and then I'll segue into the statewide survey. The local government survey, we wanted again to generate buy-in from all the various folks who hopefully will get some mileage out of this data. And so first and foremost, we had our draft survey that we ran by the Colorado Parks and Recreation Association. We had Colorado Open Space Alliance involved, as well as Colorado State Department of Local Affairs. All of them gave us very good advice, and we made some refinements based on their input. Some of the details here, this is a 23-question web-based survey. Again, did it primarily on SurveyMonkey this time. Went out to about 396 local government agencies, and we had a decent response of about 174. We made sure that we tried to receive feedback from all of the largest and biggest municipalities and counties and such, and we did our best to follow up with some of the smaller jurisdictions as well. But overall, 174 we thought was pretty solid. We had multiple choice, radio button, and fill in the blank questions. Again, this was a little bit more qualitative. Our statewide survey is designed to be more quantitative. This one was to provide us good qualitative data. And one thing I do want to mention is that the intent of this local government survey is really to meet one of those specifics in the SCORP guidelines for helping to quantify outdoor recreation supply and demand and the inventory of that. And we have better data statewide based on what we have here at State Parks and Wildlife, and then the feds have provided us some good data. The local governments do things a lot differently on all different levels, and this is our attempt at trying to gather some of that data on the local level. And it was administered internally. Again, we didn't rely on any outside help, and we did it for a fairly nominal cost, and that was pretty much the purchase of SurveyMonkey. Again, we did have staff time, though, that was involved with this, and we are still crunching the numbers and the results and comparing back to 2007. There are three goals, primarily to better understand regional and statewide issues and the needs of local governments, which in turn again translates to making this more relevant to local governments and the SCORP more relevant to local governments. Goal 2 was to provide useful data in their outdoor recreation planning efforts. So our hope is that they'll take this and translate it into their comprehensive planning efforts and such. And then Goal 3 was to provide a tool whereby local governments can better understand their needs in the context of other local government agencies. So you can see a couple of the questions that we have there within the survey. Our project timeline was about 3 months. Again, we're still sweeping up on the report writing, but we had about a month in which we developed the survey and the questionnaires. Then we distributed that over about a month-long period. I think we initially tried to get responses over a 2 or 3 week period, and we extended the deadline, which isn't uncommon. And then report writing is kind of still ongoing. We had, again, 174 out of the 396 respondents, and you can see the breakdown here. A good variety of town, city, county jurisdictions. We had city and county. That would be, say, for example, the city and county of Denver. It serves as both the city and county. And then some recreation districts here. Now we asked, again, some questions about just agency characteristics. One of these was, does your agency use one or more planning documents to guide your decision making? And it might come as a surprise, maybe it doesn't to some of you, but about 28% of our respondents said, they're making decisions not based on any sort of planning framework. So that in and of itself is fairly simple, but it also indicates that, that there is need to try and kind of bump that up a bit. There's a value and a strength in basing decisions, as most of you know, on some sort of solid foundation. In terms of agency characteristics of the respondents, again, what they oversee, what they manage, there was a wide variety. Most of them do manage some spectrum of neighborhood and or community parks. You can see how important they are to entities throughout the state. And then there's special use parks, open lands, or open space. Here in Colorado, we kind of term it as. Tend to be broader open expanses of land. Then there are regional, county, or local trails and greenways. And then some even manage larger reservoir parks similar to a state park. In terms of the outdoor recreation profile here of the acreages that are managed by some of the respondents, we drummed up numbers for each of those different categories. And you can see that even though the vast majority oversees some sort of neighborhood or community park on the previous slide, that's a smaller component of total acreage. Open lands amounted to close to 340,000. So over 90% of the respondents reported that they manage at least some neighborhood community park acreage, and again, about 81% of all reported acreage was related to open space. I might add that the intensity of the use in those areas is probably not as great as it is in those neighborhood parks, though. In terms of the outdoor, another question here related to outdoor recreation profile. Does your agency have one or more planning documents that guide decisions related to parks and trails and open space? Okay, so of the 75 or so percent that said that they did, this is how they broke down in terms of whether they were formally adopted by their government and whether it included a trails component, subject to public review or comment. This type of information we think is valuable for them, and also they can kind of see how they compare with some of their counterparts. And I think it does indicate that there's some strength in those plans that are completed and that they're formally adopted by their governments. Again, the more that we can interconnect and tie in this data into what they're doing at the local level, I think the stronger we are in the long run as a state. And types of programs offered. We really wanted to get an inventory of where folks are allocating their efforts. There's a good portion that are focusing in on healthy lifestyles here, environmental education, and youth programs. I want to add briefly that those numbers have increased. We looked at, in 2007, about 16% of our respondents offered environmental ed of some sort, but now that's increased to about 53% in 2012, which I thought was somewhat surprising. In 2008, there was about 67% that offered youth programs of some sort, and now it's up to about 72%. So we're starting to just kind of delve into some of those cross-referencing between years, and that's bringing in some interesting results. The top 5 management issues for local governments, not a huge surprise, but maintaining existing recreation infrastructure resources, trail connectivity, creating or updating their open space plan or trail plan, coordinating and cooperating with other agencies, and vandalism and safety concerns. Funding and investment need. You can see the total dollar amount here statewide. This is something that the Park Service commonly asks states to report on for LWCF annual reports, and we tried to revise our previous numbers, and based on the responses that we received, we have about $2.16 billion in unmet need as far as these various different categories. So LWCF money and other monies here in the state are critical to meeting the demand. As far as where those funding and investment needs break down, about 60% of it they indicated would be allocated towards maintenance, 30% towards capital development of new facilities, and then there's a breakdown of some of the other categories that you'll see too. The top most significant investment needs: community trail systems, trails and more trails. Sports facilities are still important, obviously, here, and then opportunities for water-based recreation. Additional trail questions. I might add that we added another piece to our local government survey that really delved a little bit more into those trails because they are so important to our state. And this gives you kind of a picture of some of the rationale for trails in communities, and it also helps, I think, the local governments figure out how best to sell trails to their city councils, their commissioners and such, helping to use some of these themes in their messaging and such. So for the local government, the utilization of results, we'll have a standalone report in our summary. Again, these are preliminary results, and we haven't actually released these. The results will help guide the development of overarching statewide outdoor recreation priorities, our goals and objectives in SCORP. There'll be relevant results will be tied to our open project selection process, tied to LWCF, similar to as in Oregon. And then the data can be used by local government agencies to better understand and address local regional outdoor recreation needs and issues. Some of the lessons learned, it doesn't have to be expensive to get useful data, and so don't let it hinder you when you're looking forward to doing a SCORP or some sort of broad outdoor recreation plan. That you can, at a minimum, do something like this that isn't too costly or staff intensive, and leverage your data to generate buy-in at the outset. Get some of those folks to buy in development of the survey, and then when you're providing your results, get as much mileage out of those same entities when you're dispersing the results. You want to get these disseminated far and wide, and it helps to have all those partners. And local government issues and needs resonate among politicos, so there's value in kind of quantifying these local government aspects. I'll try and get through the statewide public survey relatively quickly here. I'll add that this is in progress right now, again, very preliminary, but we had some key goals here to quantify outdoor resident recreation participation rates and trends statewide and regionally, again, in concurrence with SCORP. In accordance with SCORP, I should say, to better understand the public's perceptions on a range of issues and their outdoor recreation needs, to satisfy public input requirements, just as in Oregon and other states. So this really is our public involvement component to the SCORP. And then providing recreation planners with statistically reliable results for use on local and regional planning, and to build on recent statewide OIA outdoor recreation economic impacts to generate regional results. I think this is significant. Colorado was partnered with OIA to piggyback off of their statewide economic impacts and to see if we can drill down to regional economic impacts. And so we'll be taking our activity data and using the model that they've developed and seeing if we can break down regional economic impacts, which we think will hold even stronger value to different entities throughout the state and in specific regions of the state. There's some of the details on the survey. We had a mixed mode, 21 question survey, a variety of different questions, 7,000 distributed, and we had about 1,000 per each of the 7 distinct regions. I might add that each of these regions that you see here line up with our state tourism office regions. So again, we're trying to intersect tourism, outdoor recreation, and kind of get all of us talking off the same sheet of music. So if we can provide numbers that are useful to them, and they can provide useful numbers for us, we'll be better off. Again, we did this internally. I'm very fortunate that we have an excellent staff now that we merged, actually, with the wildlife side, a human dimension specialist, which helped in updating some of the questions from the 2007 public survey that we did over the phone. We beat this up again and just made it more statistically reliable. We have about 250 per region that we're shooting for. And we have a mixed mode, again, URL, where folks can log in and take the survey, or they can fill out the hard copy survey. So we sent an invitation letter. We followed up and sent them a full copy of the survey if they have not responded up to that point. And we're just at the point now where we're following up with another postcard reminder along with an extension to complete the survey. Our timeline is about 7 months to complete that. This development of the methods and questions was about 3 months or so. There was a lot of coordination with OIA as well on the front end. Data collection and data entry, about 3 months. And then report writing, we're looking at a month, probably more like 2 when it comes down to it. Survey design, again, we have questions based primarily on our 2007 survey. I mentioned the OIA Southwick relationship, and we're building on that. One thing I want to add is that we vetted questions among planners from other federal partners. And I mentioned in the local government survey getting buy-in from a number of providers. Here we did it with the feds, and they provided some really good input into some of our questions. So I think you'll see that some of the results hopefully will be relevant to the regional level. It'll translate into some of the resource management plans that the BLM and the Forest Service do, and so we're really excited that the regional breakdown at least will give them some more mileage out of the SCORP too. So far, we have about 700 responses, and we're hoping to get closer to about 1,500. 2 reporting scales again, statewide and regional. I'm not going to go too much into these, but again, we really wanted to get into the frequency of outdoor recreation participation in Colorado, not only on the statewide level and on an annual basis, but also where they're recreating. And so that's where some of the follow-up questions came in, and this is similar to some of the questions I think that Terry alluded to. We ask different categories of recreation. How many days per region 1, 2, 3, or 4 on down the line are people recreating, and so we'll be able to see kind of where the big activities are in certain regions of the state. And again, this piece primarily will translate into that economic impact component that we'll be doing. Distance traveled per weekdays. This is something we did back in 2007 and we wanted to repeat. We did a breakdown here, and you can see, again, to date, this is how results are coming in. Most folks are obviously staying close to home Monday through Thursday, whereas obviously on weekends they're getting out a little bit further, 20 to 100 miles or more. Preference question examples. Again, we want to know not only about activities and whether folks are, if they're spending time overnight, what types of facilities they're using, but also, what type of services they expect. This, again, plays into some of what local government providers are providing. There's a niche for state government providers, and then there's also some of the more rural or less developed type facilities that some of our federal providers provide here in the state. So we get a little bit of a snapshot of that with this question. We also ask them what their relative importance is for certain types of factors that maybe influence their recreation decisions. So you can see that question there. This, I think, is interesting. Again, just a preliminary result that I thought I'd share with you. Our federal providers really wanted to see what the significance of wilderness areas were to the general public. And here we asked folks, are these essential priorities for future investment or high priorities on down the line? Wilderness areas and open lands with little or no development and opportunities for solitude came in extremely high so far. And I think that's really interesting. That is substantial for given the fact that about over 50% of our state is more rural public land, and it does show support for some of the wilderness that we do have in the state. You can see some of the breakdowns as we go, and all of these are important, I might add. Just because the more folks said that one is more essential or high doesn't necessarily mean that it should be more important or I mean, there's a niche obviously for each of these different spectrums, but again, from a statewide perspective, this is useful to see. We asked folks about investment priority questions and where they like to see their future dollars spent, and you see that question there. I'll show some preliminary results in a subsequent slide, and I'll keep this moving. How do you think your participation in outdoor recreation will change over the next 5 years? The majority of folks are obviously thinking it's going to increase or somewhat or greatly. About 33% indicate staying the same. I think this will be really useful, though, when we kind of cross-reference it with age breakdowns of our respondents, too. Perceptions on funding. We want to get it. We did this in 2007, and I might add that our percent of folks that kind of believe that the management of recreation lands is underfunded has actually decreased. It's kind of interesting. So when asked, do you feel that federal, state, local agencies that manage outdoor recreation in Colorado, are they funded adequately? About 42% said, well, based on what they know, they think, yeah, they're not. And then 30% aren't sure. They need more information. So these are really the folks that you need to convince, I guess. And we can probably drill down a little bit farther into this, I'm not sure, again, based on some of the demographics that we ask at the end of the survey. Perceptions of priorities in terms of outdoor recreation. As a planner, I think this is significant. In terms of where we should prioritize future activities in investments in public recreation lands in Colorado. A lot of folks are saying long-term planning and management, again, is an essential or a high priority. All these things are important, but it's like something that indicates that folks really want you to manage what you have, do a good job with what you have, and reinvest in your existing infrastructure. The utilizations of results for the public survey, well, they'll guide, again, our overarching statewide outdoor recreation priorities as we move forward into the SCORP. Our economic impacts piece, we think, is going to be very valuable, and it'll be broken down by region. And then our results will help inform that open project selection process, which is so critical. And the data is going to hopefully be used and have some mileage by all these different local, federal, state, and agencies, local, state, federal agencies. And then a standalone report, of course, will be provided in the SCORP. So the lessons learned, money talks, and I think the more and more as we go forward, our states should work towards trying, and even counties, if you're out there listening, to the extent that we can do some, or cities, to the extent we can kind of highlight the economic impacts of outdoor recreation, I think that the more our messages will be heard. We need to provide data that's relevant. So when we're doing some sort of survey effort like this, I think, again, it's good to get that buy-in at the front end and keep them involved and really tap those resources to share the message about your results as you go forward. And then recycle survey questions and document trends over time. We're still doing that right now, but we think that that's an important piece in making this information relevant. And then leverage the skills of your available staff to the extent you can. Not every state is fortunate enough to have a human dimension specialist on staff. There's plenty of terrific consultants out there that have helped states around the country in some of their survey efforts, and also local municipalities. I've recently looked over New Mexico's survey. They had an excellent survey that was done for their SCORP a couple years ago. So again, I think the more and more we can share our information, help share some of these surveys and results, the more we don't have to reinvent the wheel each time. We can all kind of sing off the same sheet of music, so to speak. So with that, our results will be available to the public in the fall of 2013. You have a bird's eye view of them, or an early preview, so to speak. And with that, I will call it good and let Pat take over.
Okay. And Okay, I'm all set on my end here. I'm Pat Gillespie. I'm with the National Park Service, and my role, one of my roles in the Park Service is to track the state's progress in completing their SCORPs. I know we keep saying the word SCORP. I just want to make sure. I know some of you on the webinar may not quite know what that word means if we didn't say it before. It's the Statewide Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan. So what is that? This is a planning process that is required under the Land and Water Conservation Fund Act, and the requirement is for states to complete a SCORP, this comprehensive plan, prior to receiving any federal grant monies through the Land and Water Conservation Fund State and Local Assistance Program. So this is a very important document, so that just sort of gives you some overview on this. My job is to make sure that states have a completed SCORP on file with the National Park Service before they can apply for these funds. And of course, the funds are used to develop and renovate parks at the state and local level, and they're also funds that create parks through acquisitions and also through developing new facilities in areas that have never had facilities before. So it's a very exciting job, and one of the things that I do is I collect in my little office here all of the SCORPs that are produced nationwide through our states and territories. That's a total of 56 major applicants and major SCORPs. And I look at them and I share them with folks and try to get a sense of the quality. I work really hard to, in partnering with SORP, to help to improve the quality of SCORPs and to help share information. So with that, I just want to share on behalf of the National Park Service our gratitude to the Society of Outdoor Recreation Professionals for coordinating and conducting this webinar. I think this is really great, and I hope we will continue to do this. I'm sure we will. I am on a satellite that is my internet provider. There's a little bit of a delay in my slides. If you see that, there's nothing wrong. Just be patient and you'll see my slides. But anyway, for starters, what I wanted to do is just provide some observations from my end of what I see in the SCORPs as they come through. The Land and Water grants, the state and local assistance grants, may be used for SCORP products, including surveys. I think many states know this, but I mention it for those of you who are not actually on the applying end of grant funds, that the states can apply for federal money for surveying. Again, the eligible applicants for these grants are the state and territory agencies that are responsible for the SCORP. But just to clarify, the Land and Water Conservation Fund requirement for SCORPs, we do not require surveys. Back in the old days, as I call it, I think surveys were somewhat required, but no longer. But that's not to say it's not a useful tool. They're very useful tools, obviously. And we do pay for them through a planning grant. But it isn't a federal requirement. There may be ways for you to get information for your SCORP without the survey, but they're a wonderful tool. Something I've seen over the years is that many surveys are done and completed, and they are submitted to the National Park Service as part of the SCORP documentation. But it's sad to say, many times we see the SCORP come in, and we read through the SCORP, and we see there's a survey, but there's no clear relationship between the purpose of the survey, the information that's gathered through the survey, the findings of the survey, and the actual body of the plan itself. If it's in there, it's not readily apparent, and I think that's unfortunate. I think that a reader of the SCORP, no matter where we sit, whether it's an approver like ourselves for federal money or people within the state trying to understand what's the situation with their outdoor recreation situation, or just anybody who doesn't know a darn thing excuse me, about outdoor recreation, they should know that clearly there's been a survey done, what the survey was all about, the purpose of the survey, all the things we've been talking about on this webinar up to this point. And then how that information was used throughout the SCORP process. I think a way to do that, and I don't see this done very often, but I think it could be done more, it should be done more, is that when the chapters of the SCORP are pulled together and the information is being delivered through that document, to reference that survey and any findings in that survey in the body of the SCORP document. So people know that you aren't just making this up, somebody's not just sitting in an office just crunching this narrative out, that you really are using some good data, and you got good data through a survey or wherever you're getting your information. It really, I believe, should be referenced throughout that SCORP. I think it would be make that SCORP more reliable, valid, trustworthy, etc. Also, we see many times that the survey and if there's some type of a piece that accompanies the survey that talks about any types of conclusions or results as a part of the survey. Unfortunately, sometimes you don't see it, but we hope that there is something like that. It's just, it gets thrown into the entire survey, all of the results, all of the data gets dumped right into the SCORP itself, and it makes the SCORP gigantic. And I think as a reader, once again, that it's just too cumbersome. Use the raw data, place the raw data in an appendix, but not in the guts of the SCORP. But use that data throughout that SCORP document. Okay. I just changed the slide. There'll be a delay there. This was stated before, but know what you're trying to find out and how the survey results will be used. There are so many times that we see surveys in the SCORP that it is sort of out of context. We don't really know what they're trying to find out. Is it a participation survey, statewide participation survey? Are they really trying to get at an issue? We see many statewide participation surveys, but they're so broad in general sometimes we don't really know how that information, once again, is being incorporated throughout the SCORP and through any type of development of conclusions and recommendations, implementation plans, the OPSP, and so forth. By the way, that OPSP is Open Project Selection Process, how grants are how it's decided that grants are going to be awarded to a particular applicant. There's all these great opportunities to use the results of that survey, but to start out to really know what is the purpose of the survey and how you're going to use it, and think about that before you actually design and conduct a survey. Make sure that that investment in conducting that survey is really worth the time and the money that you're putting into it. Also, like I said, there are many instances where we see these, an important and very costly, however, as Terry was saying, that these statewide participation surveys, but you might not need that. You might just want to use your resources to really focus and to understand a particular outdoor recreation issue or several. You don't necessarily have to go in and do a statewide participation survey. That's your decision, the state's decision, but just consider that. You also might want to consider doing a multi-state survey, especially when you have several states that share significant natural resources. As an example, I'm actually, even though I work for DC, I'm sitting in Michigan, and look at all the states that belly right up to the Great Lakes system, and particularly I've got, Lake Michigan 30 miles from here. So many people come to this region as a destination because of Lake Michigan, but we've got, Wisconsin and Illinois, we've got Indiana and Michigan, all touching Lake Michigan. So there might, and what a recreation destination. So there might be opportunities for you to think about conducting surveys that are focused on understanding the outdoor recreation issues, opportunities associated with a multi-state shared natural resource. And then again, look and see how other states have used surveys. I think this was mentioned briefly before. But really, I have found that planners in the states we're friendly folk. We like to talk about what we're doing. We like to share ideas, and so don't hesitate to look at other state SCORPs and borrow from other state SCORPs with a permission, of course, but that there's no reason for you to have to start from scratch. I mean, I always say, there's no idea is really a brand new idea. Somebody else has probably already tried it. So get out there and get to know who the other planners are doing the same kind of work within the states. And certainly as a part of that, I've talked to other state SCORP contacts about all their successes and their drawbacks. You can find out who the SCORP contacts are either by calling your National Park Service Land and Water Conservation Fund Regional Office. You can call me, contact me. I've got my email address right there. Or certainly on Contact SORP. They are also collecting the contact information, all of the SCORPs, and then keep an eye out on other opportunities for sharing SCORP ideas and information, just like this webinar. Keep in touch with SORP. Okay? That's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Pat.
You're welcome.
Control here of the webinar screen. Hopefully I can do this quickly. Let's see. I realize that we're just about out of time here and running a little long. As long as everyone's okay, I'm going to try to get to a couple questions. I realize we're not going to be able to get to all of your questions. I apologize for that in advance. Pat did make her email address available there. We'll send out a follow-up email after this. All the presenters have agreed to make their contact information available, and if you have follow-up questions and want to contact them directly, that would be great. Just to get a few questions in here, though, Terry, I've got one here for you first. Talked a lot about gauging activity levels in Oregon. Did you have specific questions related to facility use and or program evaluation as part of your SCORP surveys? Hopefully Terry is still there. Maybe he's got us on mute. Scott, if not, would you like to take that one?
Oh, I guess I wasn't muted. I'm sorry. Yeah, we didn't really ask more information about outdoor recreation participation other than the specific questions about activities, but we did ask about program participation in outdoor recreation programs and collected information about the percentage of the population that participated in a variety of different types of outdoor recreation programs. I think it was about 18% of the Oregon population participated in any form of outdoor recreation program. So we did ask a question like that.
Great. Thanks, Terry. Scott, I'll give this next one to you. Do you have any sense for how much or how often local planners use the data and information that you collected at as part of the SCORP survey process?
Most of it's kind of anecdotal in conversations with some of those partners who have had review, the surveys and such, and then involved with disseminating that information. I know for one that a lot of those local governments do need to reference the SCORP almost by default when they request trail grants, if they're requesting some sort of statewide trail grant that our agency administers through Colorado Parks and Wildlife. So there's that piece. But then, anecdotally, I do know that folks have said that it's been valuable. And I've also had requests, over the last 5 years, maybe once every few months or so, I'll get an email from someone out there that asks if I can explain something in, the previous survey results that came through. So they are using it, but, to be honest with you, I think that it probably could get even more mileage than it does. So.
Excellent. Thanks, Scott. Actually, as long as you're on deck there, one other question. I know you mentioned your involvement or the partnership or coordination that you did in Colorado with OAI. Did you specifically have economic information type of questions in your survey, or is that something you're hoping to pair with the other research?
We're going to, yeah, good question. We're going to pair that up with the other research. We have the spending kind of factors within the model that's already been developed for the statewide economic impacts, and so we're going to basically plug in the activity participation levels, and it'll automatically provide the kind of spending figures within the model that they've already developed. And so this is a kind of a trial effort, and you know, I think OIA and Southwood will be hopeful that we can apply it on a broader level after this round too. So it'll be interesting to see.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Scott. Good. We're about 5 minutes over time, and just to respect everyone's time here, I think I am going to wrap it up. I apologize for not having more time to answer questions. Again, I would encourage you, if you still have questions, to reach out to our presenters today. We will be sending out their contact information after the webinar here. Did want to mention a couple of things before we wrap up completely here today. I did want to point everyone to some additional resources related to SCORP planning. Pat mentioned these, but our website, the SORP website, and specifically our SCORP web page, is a great place to find lots and lots of SCORP-related resources, including links to all of the available SCORPs. So that includes all 50 states, and I believe we may have a couple territories on there also. Another tool that Pat actually keyed us in on recently is the Economic Profile System Human Dimensions Toolkit. This is a software application that uses published statistics from a variety of federal sources to produce detailed socioeconomic reports on communities, counties, states, and regions. The software tool is available for free from Headwaters Economics. They're at headwaterseconomics.org. We'll make sure to add that link to our website so that everyone can get convenient access to it. And there's other information out there. I would really encourage you to check out the SORP website and the resources that we make available there for additional SCORP-related information. I did mention at the top of this webinar our annual National Outdoor Recreation Conference, which also provides additional training and information sessions related to SCORP. Our conference this year is coming up just a few short weeks away. It will be in Traverse City, Michigan from May 19th through the 23rd. We've got another great SCORP University session that's going to be held Monday morning, Monday, May 20th. So if you are planning on being at a conference, or even if you have a little bit of time here still to register if you haven't already, please factor that into your schedule. We'd love to have you there. More information about the conference and registering is available via the SORP website. There's still time to register, so please do that if you're able to attend. And then finally, I want to thank our speakers today for taking time out of their busy schedules to share their expertise and experience with surveys. This type of information sharing is a critical component of the SORP mission. It wouldn't be possible without their willingness to share an enthusiasm for planning in the great outdoors. So thank you all. And to all of you, our participants, thank you. I hope this webinar was informative and provided you with additional information that you can use in your jobs. You will be receiving a post-webinar email that includes a link to a short survey, because we just saw a webinar and survey. So of course we want to survey you. Your participation in this survey is greatly appreciated and will help us as we organize future webinars. So thanks in advance for paying attention, opening that email, and following the link to the survey. We really appreciate that. We'll also include a link in there to the SORP website for those of you that aren't members and may want to consider joining, because I'd be remiss as president to not encourage you to do that. And with that, I'll close this webinar. Thanks again to our speakers and participants. Have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you all at the next SORP webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Sergio.